Good evening and welcome to News Tonight on Rajya Sabha TV. I'm Tina Jha. Let's first take a look at the top stories today. On the eve of the winter session of Parliament, Rajya Sabha Chairman M. Venkaiah Naidu meets floor leaders, underscores need for all parties to cooperate for smooth conduct of proceedings. Prime Minister Modi appeals to opposition to make it a meaningful session. 45 bills on the agenda in a session of 20 sittings. UK court orders extradition of Vijay Mallya, gives major boost to bring back the fugitive wanted in 9,000 crore rupees bank fraud case. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley calls it a great day for India, asserts that no one who cheats the country will go scot-free. Says NDA has brought to book offender who benefited during the UPA regime. Urjit Patel steps down as RBI governor, citing personal reasons. Prime Minister and Finance Minister praise his contribution. In Twitter message, Prime Minister Modi says Dr. Patel steered Indian banking system from chaos to order and ensured discipline. All set for counting of votes for Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Telangana, Chhattisgarh and Mizoram state assemblies. Special coverage of election results live from 7 a.m. tomorrow morning on Rajya Sabha TV. And benefits for subscribers of National Pension Scheme. Government to pay increased share of 14% of their basic salary. Subscribers can withdraw 60% without having to pay tax. Measure to benefit 36 lakh subscribers. Rajya Sabha Chairman M. Venkaiah Naidu held an all-party meeting at his residence ahead of the winter session of Parliament. Leaders from 31 parties attended the meeting. In the meeting, the chairman urged members of all parties to ensure a productive and smooth winter session. He said it is a significant session as it will be the last full-fledged session before the Lok Sabha elections in 2019. The chairman said both the government and the opposition have a right to put their point forward, but it should be in accordance with the rules of the House and should not be disruptive. All parties assured their cooperation for a smooth session. Chairman Naidu also informed parliamentarians that notices for the 0 hour will now be submitted at 9:30 a.m. instead of 10 a.m. He said this will make it easier to prioritize them. The meeting also agreed on adjourning the Rajya Sabha on the first day after paying tribute to former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. The government also convened an all-party meeting ahead of the winter session. Addressing it, Prime Minister Modi urged all political parties to create a constructive atmosphere and collectively address issues related to the welfare of people.
At the all-party meeting on Monday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said his government is ready to discuss all issues of national importance in the winter session. Asserting that the government is always receptive to issues raised by parties, he said the government and the opposition have to cooperate with each other for the parliament to function smoothly.
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी भी बैठक में उपस्थित हुए। सभी सदस्यों को संबोधित करते हुए कहा कि हम सबको एक दूसरे के साथ सहयोग करके जनहित के मुद्दों पर विचार विमर्श करना चाहिए। लोकतंत्र में पक्ष और विपक्ष दोनों का इनपुट होता है तो काम को बढ़ाने में बहुत मदद मिलती है और सरकार नियम प्रक्रिया के अनुसार सभी जो विषय आएंगे उनमें चर्चा के लिए तैयार है।
The winter session of Parliament will be held from December 11th to January 8th. The government has 46 items on the agenda, including key bills and other legislative business.
इस बैठक में सभी लीडर्स उपस्थित थे। सभी ने सदन को चलाने में सहयोग प्रदान करने के लिए सरकार को आश्वस्त किया है। उन्होंने अपने विचार रखे, जनहित के कुछ विषय भी रखे। लगभग 46 मदें निर्धारित की गई हैं जिन पर कामकाज सदन करे, ये अपेक्षा है, जिसमें विधेयक भी हैं, 3 अध्यादेश हैं और सप्लीमेंट्री बजट भी है।
The opposition is likely to seek debates on various issues including farmers' problems, education, unemployment, fuel prices and other issues of public importance. The opposition is also expected to press for a JPC probe into the Rafale deal.
जो भारत की जो जांच एजेंसियां हैं, जिस तरह से उनका दुरुपयोग किया जा रहा है, इस्तेमाल किया जा रहा है, किस तरह से आरबीआई की ऑटोनॉमी खत्म की जा रही है, ये तमाम चीजों पर हमने कहा कि इन विषयों पर पार्लियामेंट के अंदर दोनों सदनों में चर्चा होनी चाहिए।
रफाल का सवाल है, ईवीएम पर विश्वास किसी का नहीं है। हम चाहते हैं कि हाथ का वोट होना चाहिए।
किसानों की लूट हो रही है। उत्तर प्रदेश में इन्होंने धान का एमएसपी रखा था 1850 रुपया और 1200 रुपया बिक रहा है, क्योंकि एक भी कांटा कहीं जो सरकारी खरीद केंद्र होता है वो खोला ही नहीं गया।
Before the meeting began, leaders observed a 2-minute silence to pay homage to former Parliamentary Affairs Minister Anant Kumar. 23 bills are listed for consideration and passage during the session. 16 are in the Lok Sabha and 7 in the Rajya Sabha. 20 new bills are listed for introduction, consideration and passage, while 2 bills are listed for withdrawal during the session. Arvind Kumar Singh's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
As many as 45 bills are on the government's agenda in this session, of which 20 are new bills. 7 key bills are pending in the upper house. These include the Trafficking of Persons Prevention, Protection and Rehabilitation Bill 2018, the National Council for Teacher Education Amendment Bill 2018, the Representation of the People Amendment Bill 2017, the Arbitration and Conciliation Amendment Bill 2018, the National Trust for Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation and Multiple Disabilities Amendment Bill 2018, the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education, Second Amendment Bill 2017. These also include the Motor Vehicles Amendment Bill 2017. The government is also looking to introduce 20 new bills in the session. These include the Companies Amendment Bill 2018, the Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Marriage Bill 2018, the Indian Medical Council Amendment Bill 2018. On the eve of the winter session, opposition parties also held a meeting. It was attended by leaders of 21 parties. The meeting, however, was skipped by Samajwadi Party and the BSP. That, of course, raised several questions. The opposition parties discussed the strategy to corner the government on a number of issues.
That we have to stop the BJP's assault on our institutions, stop the assault on the CBI, on the RBI, on the Election Commission, on all institutions, assault on the Constitution. There was consensus in the room that the BJP's corruption on Rafale, demonetization, other areas is simply not acceptable, and we are going to fight it, and we are going to do whatever we can to expose it. And there was a consensus that we are going to work together to defeat the BJP.
Rashtriya Lok Samata Party President Upendra Kushwaha resigned from the Union Council of Ministers and also walked out of the BJP-led NDA on Monday. Announcing this a day ahead of Parliament's winter session, the RLSP leader from Bihar said he is open to joining the opposition alliance that includes Lalu Prasad's RJD and the Congress. In his resignation letter, Kushwaha expressed disappointment with the government for not working for the poor and the oppressed. The RLSP may join hands with the opposition, which includes Lalu Prasad's RJD and the Congress. Bihar sends 40 MPs to Lok Sabha.
स्पेशल पैकेज की बात की गई बिहार के लिए, कुछ भी ऐसा नहीं हुआ जिससे बिहार के लोगों का विकास अलग से दिख सके। बिहार आज भी वही खड़ा है जहां पहले था। शिक्षा व्यवस्था, स्वास्थ्य व्यवस्था पूर्णतः चौपट है। बिहार के विकास को ध्यान में रखते हुए कुछ भी विशेष रूप से नहीं किया गया।
In a breakthrough for Indian investigation agencies, a UK court has ordered fugitive liquor baron Vijay Mallya's extradition to India. The Westminster Magistrates Court Chief Magistrate Judge Emma Arbuthnot said there was a prima facie case against Mallya and his human rights would not be infringed if he was extradited to India. Turning down Mallya's attempts to evade extradition, the court said there was no ground at all to believe that Vijay Mallya faces any risk in Mumbai's Arthur Road jail, which has been recently redecorated. The judge said 62-year-old Mallya misrepresented the state of the company and said that there was no sign of a false case being mounted against him.
People are still asking Vijay, now that everything
Coming just days after Christian Michel's extradition, this is a big boost to India's fight against corruption. Mallya has been wanted by the CBI and the ED for bank fraud amounting to 9,000 crore rupees, after which he fled to London in March 2016. He's also been declared fugitive by the court. The court has sent Mallya's case to the Home Secretary of State. The former Kingfisher Airlines boss has been on bail since his arrest in April last year. Mallya now has 14 days to appeal against the decision. Welcoming the UK court order, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley said the offender who benefited during the UPA rule is being brought to the book by the NDA government.
आज इस देश के लिए बहुत गौरव का विषय है कि लंदन की जिस अदालत का फैसला आया है कि कोई भी व्यक्ति भारत के साथ बेईमानी करेगा, इसकी अर्थव्यवस्था के साथ बेईमानी करेगा, हमारी बैंकिंग व्यवस्था के साथ बेईमानी करेगा और चाहेगा कि मैं दुनिया के किसी कोने में जाकर छुप जाऊं, तो इस देश में इतनी क्षमता है और इस देश की नैतिकता में इतनी क्षमता है कि ये उसको वहां से भी ढूंढ लाएगी।
Urjit Patel stepped down as Reserve Bank governor, citing personal reasons. Dr. Patel, who took over as the 24th governor of the central bank on 5th September 2016, was appointed for a 3-year term. He was handpicked by the BJP-led government after his predecessor, Raghuram Rajan. In a brief statement, Patel said he has decided to step down with immediate effect. In a Twitter message, Prime Minister Narendra Modi praised Patel's contribution, saying he steered the banking system from chaos to order and also ensured discipline. The Prime Minister also called Patel a thorough professional with impeccable integrity, who leaves behind a great legacy and will be missed immensely. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley also appreciated the service rendered by Dr. Urjit Patel. He added that it was a pleasure to work with him and benefited from his scholarship.
The government deeply acknowledges the great services that he has rendered to India, its economy, in several capacities, more particularly as the Governor of the Reserve Bank and the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank. My own experience in dealing with Dr. Patel was indeed a very delightful one because I interacted with him very frequently and benefited greatly from his scholarship.
And Finance Minister Arun Jaitley announced an enhanced government's contribution towards the national pension system to 14% from the existing 10%. In a bid to streamline the NPS and make it more attractive, especially for government employees, the Union Cabinet approved some changes in the scheme that will benefit around 18 lakh central government employees. The government has also made the 60% withdrawal amount tax-free at the time of retirement. The individual contributions, which will continue to be capped at a maximum of 10% of the basic salary, will be exempt from taxable income under Section 80C of the Income Tax Act.
एम्प्लॉय का शेयर जो होगा वो 10% ही रहेगा। सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट का जो शेयर होगा उसमें उसको 10 से 14% कर दिया गया है। तो देयर इज अ 4% इंक्रीज in the contribution of the central government. So the corpus now will be 24%, of which 14% will be contributed by the state.
India successfully test-fired nuclear-capable ballistic missile Agni 5 from Dr. Abdul Kalam Island off the Odisha coast on Monday. This is the 7th trial of the indigenously developed surface-to-surface missile. Agni 5 is a 3-stage missile and is capable of carrying 1.5 ton of nuclear warheads. This is the latest and the most advanced variant in terms of navigation and guidance, warhead and engine. Time for a short break, but news and updates will continue on the other side. Do stay with us.
On this edition of India as well, we will analyze President Kovind's visit to Myanmar.
Myanmar was in turmoil. A large number of their people who were fighting the dictatorship, so to say, they took refuge in India. And now many of them are in positions in government and in power and in civil society. I think we have that goodwill there.
Absolutely.
And we need to capitalize on that goodwill to further strengthen this relationship.
China has deep links with Myanmar because of various ethnic groups who, spill over into the Chinese and into Myanmar. In fact, many of the ethnic groups have sought the Chinese mediation, brought in Chinese. Chinese have used them as a pressure point on Myanmar.
Myanmar is also looking for, in cooperation with India, health sector. They need a lot of help in the health sector, education sector, and then investments from India, agriculture, information technology. We have a large number of students, Myanmar students coming, not only for undergraduate studies, but even high-tech program.
Comparatively, strengths neglected is people-to-people level, which should be strength.
Well, the stage is set for the big counting day on Tuesday, 11 December. Results for assembly elections to the 5 states of Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Mizoram and Telangana will be known tomorrow. The electoral fate of over 8,500 candidates of 5 states, which went to polls recently, is sealed in over 1.74 lakh EVMs, which will be opened tomorrow. After voting, the EVMs have been stored in strong rooms. The strong rooms will be open in the presence of candidates or their representatives, from where machines will be taken to counting centres. Voting was held for 230 seats of Madhya Pradesh Assembly, 90 seats of Chhattisgarh Assembly, 199 seats of the Rajasthan Assembly, 40 seats of the Mizoram Assembly and 119 seats of Telangana Assembly in 4 phases between 12th November to 7th December. Rajya Sabha TV will bring you detailed and live coverage from 7 a.m. tomorrow morning on the minute-by-minute update on all results related to news. And over to some international news now. French President Emmanuel Macron meets trade unions and employees organizations in a bid to diffuse weeks of unrest in Paris and other cities. President Macron addressed the nation as Yellow Vest protesters continued blocking traffic across France after a weekend of riots tore a trail of destruction. The country has seen days of demonstrations against fuel tax rises, high living costs and other issues. French finance minister visited the shops in Paris that had been damaged during the protests. He termed the situation a crisis for both society and democracy. About 1,25,000 protesters took to the streets, with more than 1,200 taken into custody. Capital city Paris was particularly badly hit, with windows smashed, cars burnt and shops looted as 10,000 people took part in the demonstrations. France deployed around 89,000 police but still failed to deter the determined protesters. And for more on that big global story, we're being joined on News Tonight by Mr. Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs Editor, The Hindustan Times. Sir, thank you for joining us on News Tonight. Now we are seeing that, the protests in France have entered the fourth week. Help us understand what are the issues at the root of the Yellow Vest protests in the country.
Well, France has been struggling with poor economic growth rates, high unemployment rates, low productivity economy for a number of years now. In fact, Emmanuel Macron's own election, if you wish, where he was able to win and defeat the two traditional mainstream parties, represented a revolt against that present economic and social condition. And so it was expected that there would be problems, but France needs to carry out major economic structural reforms.
Yes.
The government's targeted growth rate of this year was 1.7%, and at present it looks like they'll only get about half, maybe a quarter of that rate. So when Macron began carrying out these reforms, including, as you may know, an increase in a fuel tax that was supposed to be introduced in January, protests then broke out. They don't reflect so much, I think, the fuel tax as much as general concerns and anger about the employment issue, low growth rates, and to some degree the arrogance of the French establishment.
So how will these violent protests impact the government's policies, particularly President Macron? Do you think he'll be forced to step down?
No, I don't think so. The French system has a very fixed structure as far as the president is concerned. He's not dependent. He's directly elected. He's not dependent on a majority in parliament, in the National Assembly, to survive. More importantly, France is quite used to this. Protests, violent protests in France as part of their political culture, if you wish, are quite common. These are unusually large, admittedly, but they will not stop Macron. The real issue is whether Macron will now have the political mandate and political strength to continue with unpopular economic reforms, because that's what France needs, but they will obviously cause some disruption to the society as a whole. He's already rolled back the fuel tax rise, which was actually about meeting the Paris Agreement on climate change requirements, but he's pushed it back only 6 months. So he is expected to address the nation sometime today, and presumably will slowly attempt to diffuse this crisis. But the big issue will now be whether he has the political strength to carry out the reforms, more than the question of whether he will step down.
Also, sir, the French finance minister has termed it, in fact, has gone on record to say that the protests are an economic catastrophe. Do you think, in fact, how bad do you think is the economic damage in France at the moment, considering the protests have turned violent?
Well, sir, the target for the economic growth rate of France anyway this year was only 1.7%, which is healthy for a mature economy, but not particularly striking. With these protests, I believe the growth rate for this quarter has already fallen by about 75%, which would mean that if this were to continue, you would be looking at maybe halving the economic growth rate of France from 1.7 to maybe 0.8 or less. So yes, that would automatically make it harder for the reforms to be carried out. It will mean the government will have less revenue to pay to help absorb some of the welfare costs of these reforms. So automatically, yes, it's not good news for France at a time when the rest of Europe is anyway facing an economic slowdown. And the expectation is that next year we will see a larger global economic slowdown, which will further impact growth. So this is not good news for Macron. It's not fatal for him politically, but it will make his job all that much more difficult.
Exactly, that's what. So what began as a backlash to Macron's climate policy is now focusing attention on the economic frustration and the political distrust of poorer working families in France. Sir, do you think it's a larger statement on Europe and the economies of the West?
Yes, because you've already seen the Gilets Jaunes demonstrations echoed now in, I believe, at least 3 other European countries, including Belgium and so on. So you're seeing other countries see similar, smaller protests going on. But we've also seen, for example, almost all the European leaders, major European leaders, struggling to hold on to power. Rajoy in Spain has been toppled. Merkel in Germany has resigned from the party leadership and will effectively, this will be her last run as a chancellor.
Yes.
We saw the Brexit revolt in Britain, again, partly driven by the economic discrepancies within Europe, within Britain, especially between the north and the south. Italy changes governments almost on a very frequent basis and is elected a government that has, again, not part of the mainstream system. And even in places like Sweden and so on, we've seen anti-immigrant right-wing parties establish themselves at 15 or 20% of the vote. So yes, there's a general malaise in Europe, in the economics of Europe, which is feeding into larger social discontent. And Europe needs to carry out major reforms, which again are going to harm their population before they will produce economic gains. So this, yes, it's been feeding into it, and France has, because it is the second largest European economy, of course, this has been it has produced a large focus on the problem of Europe. But the point is that if France is unable to reform, the ability of Europe as a whole to reform becomes seriously impaired because of the importance of France and the likely movement of Britain outside, the third largest economy outside of the European system.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on News Tonight and putting things into perspective for us. On to some sports news now. India beat Australia by 31 runs in the first test to take a 1-0 lead in the 4-match series at Adelaide. Chasing a target of 323, Australia were all out for 291 in 119.5 overs on the final day. The home side resumed from overnight 104 for 4, needing 219 more for an improbable victory. Batting first, India were all out for 250 in their first innings and then bowled out the host for 235 to take a 15-run lead. India made 307 in their second innings to set Australia a challenging target. With the win, Virat Kohli became the first Asian captain to win tests in England, South Africa and Australia, while wicketkeeper Rishabh Pant made history by equalising the record of taking 11 catches in a test currently held by England's Jack Russell and South Africa's AB de Villiers. And that's it from us in this news bulletin. Thanks for your time.